Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webcast today. We're glad to have you back for another Decision Lens event, and we are pretty excited to have a guest speaker today who's never been on one of our webcasts before, and so we're proud to introduce him and hope that it's someone that you enjoy working with and talking to moving forward. Our topic today is focused on the organizational success of planning strategies, and really how do you take your strategies and make them real with a combination of software and capabilities and process work and human capital work and all the things that need to go into it. And it's a pretty good topic that aligns with things that we have talked about in previous events, and we'll think it'll be a pretty good one today. My name is Matt Ippery, part of our marketing team here at Decision Lens, and I'm really glad to have you today. Before we get going, I want to do a couple logistic check-ins just so you know how it'll work. First of all, we plan on being done in about 45 minutes. We'll get you out of here at about quarter of the hour or 10 to the hour. As we know, everyone's got things to do later in the day. Secondly, indeed, the session is being recorded, and that'll be distributed to you and anyone else at your organizations who may have registered. And we will also distribute the content that is presented. So no need to worry about asking for that or if you'll get it, because you will. And if you need to jump off in the middle, we understand, or if you need to do anything else, we get it, and you will get those things. So with those logistics out of the way, most importantly, we want to hear from you during the session. If you've got any questions, any thoughts or ideas, and you want us to answer them live, go ahead and use the chat function there of the WebEx and look for Maddie Scott, the host and presenter. Should be pretty much the only name you see, but shoot your question to her, and we will collect those throughout the event, and we will do questions live at the end. But please feel free to put them into the event, into the chat screen throughout the event. If for some reason we don't get to your question or you don't think about it, you can always feel free to email any of us, the speakers or myself throughout, or who you got the invitation from, anyone, and we'll get those questions answered. And as always, you can reach us on Twitter and the Decision Lens community if you want to get other questions answered or anything else. All right, so with those out of the way, let's get going. Like I said, I've got a pretty interesting topic all about making your strategies a reality with some of the right process, the right workforce planning, and the right software you need in place to really hit on those things that you plan to do. We're proud and excited to have two speakers today. One you've heard from before, Maddie Scott from Decision Lens, but the new person I'd like to introduce to you from the Decision Lens universe is Joe Rafter. Joe was actually a previous user of Decision Lens a bit in a previous life, and has since become head of a company known as Business Change Leadership, and he's got a great view on working with different organizations in a way to actually make transformation and actually make change and actually make strategic progress possible with services, with models, with templates, with different things that he's done and seen successful. So I think you're going to like hearing from Joe in a few minutes. I'll let him introduce himself in just a few minutes, but it'll be good to hear from him. And he's our special guest, and we're glad to have him. So thank you in advance, Joe. All right, so I want to do a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. Like I said, our topic today is all about making strategies a reality and making sure you've got the corporate muscle and the tools in place you need to make your strategies a reality and actually make success possible beyond just what you plan. What we'll talk through is on your screen now. We're going to talk a little bit at the beginning, as an introduction about why governance, which in a lot of ways is what we're talking about, it comes off as a bad word in so many cases. And then Joe will walk us through the capability model and some of his examples of how he's put it into place to really help organizations be more successful. And then Maddie will talk to us a little bit about how Decision Lens and the software set has accompanied work like Joe's at organizations to really put some extra technological muscle behind a strategy as well. And then we'll do some live Q&A. And like I said, I hope to be done in about quarter to the hour, and we'll have you on your way. All right, so what are we really talking about today? Let's hop into it a bit. Like I said, we're talking about making a strategy a reality and really making your organization successful with what it's planning. And the term that is often used for that, and a lot of companies put in place, the term is governance. And we're often talking about IT projects or IT initiatives or capital projects, IT governance, or whatever we're talking about there. And that word is the right word to use. The flaw, however, is that the word carries a lot of baggage, and it's a lot more baggage than it really should based on what it actually means. I've got a Gartner quote on here on how they define it, and they use words, the process that ensure the effective and efficient use of IT in enabling an organization to achieve its goals. It's a pretty benign definition. It really just says, what do I have to put in place to be successful? Nowhere in there do you see words like, penalties or rules or punishment or all the things that governance tends to bring along, or heavy or hard. Unfortunately, it's come to mean so much more than it actually is. It really should be viewed at your organization as what you have to put in place from a process and a tool perspective to be successful, not looked at as the bad oversight man or the bad process leader who's going to make you do extra status reports every 2 days. That's often what it looks like. We like to look at governance as what you're doing every day anyway. Some of you may have seen this framework from Decision Lens before, but it's how, in a lot of ways, we talk about governance. Governance is these processes that you do every day. Strategy, you do planning, whether it's an annual, regular check-ins, quarterly base, all the things you do for strategy and linking your IT strategy, your business strategy. These are things you do. Your executives do it, your teams do it, your projects do it. You do a lot of budgeting and finance. You report on it. You plan for it. You budget it. You ensure things are tracking to it. You process new demand. You prioritize and choose what to invest in of that demand. You then manage execution as it goes. You do regular analysis and reporting, and you check in on that with ongoing review and management. That's what governance really is. And those are all words that should look pretty familiar to you. And in reality, great solutions exist for many parts of governance, and I've highlighted a few of them here. There are great solutions out there for budgeting and finance, either at the sort of enterprise general ledger level or at the IT department level or across there with tools like Aptio or other different pieces. There are great demand management and ideation tools out there. There are excellent execution in PPM and project management tools out there. There are super analysis and reporting and business intelligence tools out there. But the problem is there aren't great solutions for all. And that's where what we're talking about today is you can't just rely on a solution or on one of your existing solutions to make sure your strategy is being linked to execution. So what's missing? What's missing is alignment of resources right to that business strategy. Why is someone assigned to a project? Why is someone managing an initiative? Why is someone spending more time on initiative X than initiative Y? It's because of your business strategy and your plan. It's not just a vision statement on the wall that you make people think about. Oh, I remember it. We got it on the wall. I've been thinking about strategy the whole time. It's really not that. It's direct linking of execution to strategy. It's clear understanding of trade-offs when you have to make them, not having a black hole where people throw requests over a wall, whether it's to IT or to a PMO, and they never hear from it again. It's a conversation about we can do A, B, and C. We can't do D, E, and F, and here's why. Here's the resource need. Here's the strategic need. It's about strategic prioritization, not just project management, and it's about portfolio visibility, not just resource scheduling. So that's a lot what's missing, and that's what we're really going to focus on today. Joe's going to take you through different ways that you can plan and build and set your organization around it, and then Maddie's going to take some time and walk you through how you can add technological power to it as well with Decision Lens. So with that, I am proud and excited to introduce Joe Rafter. And Joe, if you can hear us, go right ahead and introduce yourself and get going.
Great, Matt. Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with you here, Matt. So, hello everyone. My name is Joe Rafter, and I am, as Matt said, the CEO of Business Change Leadership. We are a boutique management consultancy that focuses on strategy implementation, business transformation, and leadership breakthroughs. I'm honored to be here and to share some perspective with you today. So if you could, next slide. Thanks, Matt. I think it's safe to assume that we all appreciate the challenges of strategy implementation. I don't think we'd be on this call if we didn't. But before we get into some of how we approach it, let's establish a baseline and look at some research. So what you have here in front of you is some information from the University of Pennsylvania, and for those of you who like to read and do your research, there's a great book that came out years ago with a new edition recently called Making Strategy Work. And this basically lays out a whole series of obstacles from a joint Wharton-Gartner survey as well as a Wharton Executive Education survey. And what you can see here is that, there's a series of obstacles, and, in both of those surveys, there was some agreement on what are the most common ones. So I'm not going to go into the details of these obstacles, but I find this a very useful perspective to help us design approaches for how we're going to address strategy implementation inside our organizations. Next slide, please. So if that wasn't convincing enough, some additional perspectives. So, McKinsey did a survey in 2013, 311,000 people across 400 organizations. The classic 70% of transformations fail. Recently, Forbes had an article, 534 global executives, 48% believe they're not prepared to successfully execute their transformation. Another perspective here from Donald Sull out of MIT, surveyed 400 global CEOs. Executional excellence was the #1 challenge, and that 2/3 to 3/4 of the companies struggled to execute their strategy. And finally, if you look at the Fortune 500s and the reality that they've experienced over the past 15 to 75 years, you begin to realize that life expectancy of these companies is beginning to shorten, and one of the keys to addressing that is better strategy implementation. So let's kind of wrap this up and talk a little bit more about, let's move from, I'll say, admiring the problem into how do we at Business Change Leadership approach this, and what can we do to improve our chances for success? So in our experience, we've learned that with increased complexity comes a need for increased capability. And capability, I'm using this in a sense as a container that I want to unpack here in the next 15 to 20 minutes as we move forward through our slides. Next slide, please. So how we like to approach it is really through two perspectives. If you really want to improve your ability to execute your strategy, you have to have capability, increased capability, and you also need to work with mindset. And by mindset, I'm referring to your worldviews and how you get your head, your heart, and your hands all connected in the execution of your strategy. I'm not going to really spend any time on mindset here today. Happy to have follow-up conversations after this. But to optimally address your transformation, you really got to span both of these elements, but we're going to drill into the capability piece. And some of you, look back one slide, Matt. Some of you may be familiar with the Ho-Shin-Conry concept of aligning your company goals or your strategy with the plans of middle management or your tactics and the work performed by employees inside of operations. That's really what our model is aiming at. So let's drill into that. So we've organized this capability model into 3 basic pillars. Pillar #1 is drive the strategy. And inside that pillar is a series of capabilities. I'm going to walk through these just just to provide a simple definition, and then we'll move forward into some real live case studies. So the business strategy, I like to think of this as a 3 to 5 year vision and strategic plan of what the company wants to achieve, do, and win in the market over the next 3 to 5 years. Business plan then becomes the 1 to 2 year operating plan that falls out of that business strategy, where budgets get established, locked in, and projects get loaded into a portfolio of execution over that same time horizon. Your business governance then provides air traffic control, oversight, monitoring, measurement, course correction of the execution of those projects that fall out of the business plan. Your risk management focus is how are you reacting to the risks of your strategy, like new product launches from current competitors or emerging competitors. Next is your business architecture. How are you, what are your key competitive differentiators inside of your business strategy, and how are you mechanizing them from a process perspective in your organization? Finally, business benefits. What is the value that you're going to return as a result of executing your strategy? What's the business value in terms of revenue, profit, efficiency, effectiveness, market growth, wallet share, however you want to measure that? What is the real value that you're achieving through executing this strategy? That's basically the first pillar. That's all the capabilities that are needed to drive your strategy forward. I'm going to skip over the middle, unleash the people, and move into pillar 3, implementing the value. So another series of capabilities here. First, the portfolio management. I like to think of this as the very simple handles for loosely organizing your program and project portfolio into some organizational constructs that make sense to senior leadership, like it might be a line of business. You might have a sales portfolio or an operations portfolio, or you may want to divide your marketing portfolio into digital or print-based views of projects. So the portfolios are really a simple organizing mechanism. Program and project management, scope, cost, and schedule. How are you taking your complex challenges and breaking them down into a series of executable programs of work? Financial management. How are you managing and measuring your budgets, right? Are you establishing those budgets up front? Are you measuring? Are you burning them down over the course of the execution of the project? Are you hitting your capital expense targets? And what adjustments have to get made along the way? Resource management. I think of this in terms of 2 elements. First, your project team. Within your project teams, do you have the required skills? And do you have the required capacity, the time to execute? So do you have the right people inside the project team who have the skills and capabilities to be successful? And do you have enough of them? Do you have enough developers? Do you have enough testers? Do you have enough business analysts, project managers, et cetera, to actually execute your project well? Then on the other half, you have your impacted stakeholders. So we create projects inside organizations to drive change that aligns to our strategy, and we need our employees to absorb that change. And do the employees have the skills, and do they have the time? Do they have enough time to actually absorb the changes into their environment so that you can realize those benefits, realize that value? So that next capability, value realization. So 6, 12, 18 months after you've deployed your project, are you actually getting the business benefits that you plan for up in the first pillar under Drive the Strategy? And that's a simple exercise of pulling out the business case from Drive the Strategy and auditing it against its plan in a 6, 12, 18-month type of a time frame to make sure that the employees are absorbing that change and you're actually getting the revenue, the profit, the productivity, efficiency, effectiveness gains. Finally, in terms of implementing the value, you got to have methods, you got to have processes, you got to have playbooks for people to execute their jobs. Those playbooks contain tools, techniques, and of course you have to be able to generate reports so you can communicate progress along the way. Finally, unleashing the people. One of the most overlooked pillar in my personal experience. The reason why this pillar is in the center is because it really is, the people really are the glue that enables an organization to take a strategy and drive it through operations. If the people don't pick up the changes, you're not going to be successful. The investments are going to be your investments in these assets, whether it's IT assets, product assets, operational assets, will be stranded. So first and foremost, stakeholder engagement. what are you doing to engage all of the impacted stakeholders, from sponsor through your project team all the way out into your operations folks, so that they're able to absorb the change as efficiently and effectively as possible? Secondly, leadership development. So what activities, what skills, what mindsets are being undertaken such that the leaders, the way people think and how they behave, is shifting to generate enthusiastic adoption of your strategy? When you're moving from a print-based business, as an example, to a digital business, you actually have to think a little differently as a leader, and what's being done within your strategy to generate the ability for leaders to think differently. Next is cultural development. When all those leaders start being able to think a little differently in terms of the new world that the organization wants to enact for them, from a cultural perspective, how do the relationships change? Do people start working less vertically in silos, and do they start working more horizontally across silos? And how does that get accepted as a cultural norm, all the way down to, is note-taking on a laptop, an accepted cultural norm inside your organization? I've been involved in organizations where, I've seen the movement from paper-based notes to iPad and laptop-based notes. It's not always accepted everywhere. And there's designs, there's things you can do to actually generate that level of cultural shift. Organizational design and alignment. What do your spans and layers look like? Are you paying attention to the continual refinement of your organizational structure, of your organizational processes, so that you're optimizing things like centers of excellence, communities of practice, and you're really building skills inside the organization in the way that you want it to be built, whether that's in a matrix environment, whether that's in a very vertically oriented environment, or whether that's in, frankly, a very distributed environment. The point here is you want to make sure you're paying attention to those things, and such that you're building what you actually want in the future. Finally, human performance management. This is all about incentivizing, rewarding, and recognizing your employees for the implementation of the strategy that you're attempting to achieve. So what the old saying, what gets measured gets done, I think is very true. And integrating your human performance management system to incentivize, reward, and recognize your employees to deliver on the strategy is a really nice lever to pull in large-scale change. Okay, so that's basically the model in a nutshell, in about a 5 to 8 minute overview, and that gives you a nice static view of a bunch of competencies or capabilities that you probably have in your organization. And one of the things there are two things I like about the model is, first, it's plain English. It's really easy to sit down with a senior leader and have a conversation around how are these capabilities being organized and arranged to enact the successful execution of your strategy. And there's probably, in large organizations, there's probably 6 to 8 leaders who are accountable for all of these capabilities. And so if you can get those 6 to 8 leaders to come together, then you can actually effectively you can optimize the model and its implementation inside the organization. Okay, next slide. So let's talk about some case studies, and I share the case studies because I want to deepen our understanding and our discussion. So let's see. This is the first way that we start to look at how the model comes to life inside a real implementation. So first implementation of this model for basically a $2 billion legacy Yellow Page advertising company with declining revenues. Print product was dying. People were moving from using a Yellow Page book to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. So we implemented this model, and what you see is the blue highlighted capabilities are actually the capabilities that we invested in time, process, and people. The gray capabilities we actually didn't really touch. We did not focus on having a McKinsey-like strategy and a McKinsey-like business plan. We focused very heavily on business governance and business benefits. What is a very entrepreneurial organization, and people were encouraged to bring their ideas into the governance forum. The best ideas won, they got funded, and they moved over into the implement the value pillar, where they got with an extreme focus on executing as best as possible. Very, smaller organization, 2 physical office spaces, about 4,000 sales reps all over the country, but 2, back offices, so we could generate stakeholder engagement because we really had a captive audience. The success story is there, as you can see. We launched 8 products in 2.5 years, and we took digital revenue from $30 to $300 million along the way. We also took about 33% of the sales force out of the field because we automated the sales process. And at times, through the stakeholder engagement, through really strong business governance and alignment, we achieved peaks of 80% of IT labor was being spent on projects and change, with 20% on lights-on support or maintenance. And for those of you in the IT space, any reference from Gartner or from CIO magazine will tell you typically the opposite is true. It's typically 80% for maintenance, 20% for projects. And to translate that into business terms, think of it this way: for every dollar that the business gives IT, 80 cents was going to the project and change and new capability, and 20 cents was going to lights on and maintenance. A couple things we learned through this experience is tailoring the model to meet the culture of the leadership in the organization is critical. What I mean by that is, I referred to it a little bit earlier, this organization was highly entrepreneurial. And so having a top-down business strategy, perfectly documented with, a tremendous amount of analysis, was not how the company worked. It was not the culture. So we designed this to match the culture by embracing the entrepreneurism inside the organization, creating a really strong business governance capability where people could come and get their thoughts heard, their business cases heard and approved or not. And we approved some, and we didn't approve all of them, and then move them from governance into execution. Okay, next slide, please. So here's case study number 2, very different environment. So $17 billion utility business that was redefining their strategy and operating model. So much larger organization, heavily regulated, different culture, different structure, different business all together. So the first thing that kind of jumps out is, different capabilities were implemented and focused on. So as you can see, real strong 3 to 5 year strategy planning process. Lots of focus on that. Lots of focus on the business plan, the 1 to 2 year operating budget, and lots of focus on risk management. How do we de-risk our strategy and our operations every day? It's frankly, it's really a core competency of a utility. It's a core competency of a lot of large capital-intensive organizations, and I think we have some folks on the phone who are from those types of shops. Moving forward here, we very strong focus on stakeholder engagement. Getting out into the field, understanding what was going on with the union, understanding what was going on, frankly, inside the trucks that we were rolling out into the field to do work. Lots of leadership development, really strong investment in new ways of sponsoring projects, new ways of leading the change inside the organization, not just from a process perspective, method and tools and techniques, but also from a mindset. How do we get people to think differently about change, and how do we get people to be in a different relationship with change, not thinking that change is a bad thing? OD and alignment, spans and layers, organizational efficiency and effectiveness, lots of focus there. And then implementing the values, strong program management, strong financial, strong resource management capabilities. Actually, in the resource management space, this is where we deployed what we called a heat mapping process. And that heat mapping process aligned the impacts from each of the programs and projects that came out of the strategy, identified where their deployments, when their deployments were happening, and what resource groups those deployments were hitting and when. And what that enabled us to see is when we had programs that were multiple programs impacting the same resource group within the same window of time, we recognized that we probably didn't have the capacity to absorb that change inside that resource group, and we needed to reschedule, resynchronize, reorient, reprioritize some of the work so that we could get the adoption by the stakeholders and generate the value. You know, success stories here, 700 plus people engaged in the stakeholder engagement, the leadership development, estimated basically the enablement of over $150 million in benefits. We were very effective with a lean IT implementation, you know, in-year return on spend of that of about 112%. One of the key learnings here, you know, having an integrated project plan, change plan, and metrics are really, really critical. When you get, and I'll add a third one in there, if you really want to bring efficiency and speed to your execution, to the extent you can get your project, your process, and your change folks all working together well, you'll be able to accelerate the execution of that particular project. Next slide, please. So next view. So we've talked about just kind of a static view of the model. We've now talked about a few case studies and how you can light up some of the capabilities, and you don't need every capability in every single instance. You got to tailor the model for the culture and the expectations of the organization. Here's another view, a little more dynamic, of the flow of the work through the capability model. So, you know, there's a series of 5 cycles here moving from left to right. Each cycle is meant to indicate the frequency of time. So cycle 1 is basically an annual process. Cycle 2 and 3 are kind of like monthly or quarterly. Cycle 4 is on a monthly basis, and cycle 5 is frankly on a daily, weekly time frame, right? You should be engaging your stakeholders a lot. But you can see how things kind of move through from left to right. And you can see down at the bottom some common kind of horizontal capabilities that are always alive and just have to be there to support and augment the execution of the flow up top. So let's now, before we go into the next slide, I want to just tee it up. What we're going to show now is how this actually worked in each of those previous case studies. So next slide, please. So back to that digital transformation of the legacy Yellow Pages company, right? Not a lot of strategy, heavy on business governance, a lot of cycle 2, cycle 3 focus. So a lot of monthly, quarterly activities setting things up for cycle 4, where we executed and generated a high degree of stakeholder engagement. Next slide will show the utility perspective. So here, you know, again, you get to see a different view, right? What kind of came alive? And the other piece that this helps us understand is, you know, what are the high leverage capabilities that we have in the model to generate improvement in our execution of strategy? And in any organization that might have a configuration like this, I'd suggest 2 opportunities. Number 1 is that business governance, to provide that air traffic control and coordination from cycle 2 and cycle 1 into cycle 4 and 5. And secondly, that human performance management, right? How can we start to incentivize, recognize, and reward our employees for executing the strategy? Next slide, please. Okay, So let's stick a bow around the conversation and through the survey that you guys took. So when you all registered for this webcast, you completed a survey, and we actually had a 77% participation rate in the survey. So really interesting perspective. This is your data. This is what you're feeding back to us. So as you look at this, I ask you to consider 3 specific questions. First, where did your responses show up in comparison to your peers? So think about it. I want you to recall the responses that you provided, and where are you showing up? How are you seeing the obstacles as compared to your peers? Secondly, which pillars, as you look at that, which pillars of our capability model begin to come into focus for you as needing attention inside your companies? So where's the opportunity for you inside your organizations, given your responses and given what you're seeing here, for you to improve your internal capability for executing strategy? Lastly, what actions could you take as a result of our webcast here today to improve your company's strategy implementation process? My suggestion is that by pondering these 3 questions, you'll actually optimize the investment of your time here with us today and generate some improvements as you return back to your organizations once we conclude our call. Okay, next slide. So I just want to wrap with first, with finally an appreciation. I really am grateful for everyone on this webcast, as well as for my friends at Decision Lens. So let me flip it back over to Decision Lens, and where they're going to help us explore how you might reinforce your strategic success on a daily basis.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. And again, we appreciate having you. And I think a lot of people can benefit from the model you showed and the work you've done. I want to just turn back just to these survey results just for one more second before I turn over to Maddie. I think there's some pretty interesting stuff in here. About half of you, just under half of you, and we had well over 100 responses. About half of you sort of said there was sort of unclear intentions or outcomes or benefits in your implementation, and that's pretty enlightening to me. I mean, that means that 1 of every 2 of you said, I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to be driving toward with an outcome or a benefit when I start thinking about implementation. And I think so much of that just says, all right, how do I know I'm implementing right? How do I know I'm doing anything in the right path unless I'm really thinking about those outcomes and benefits up front? And that's pretty amazing to me. And then the second one right there, nearly half of you again said that priorities in reality are undefined. We haven't done a good job as an organization to really talk through the priorities of our organization. If I had to make intellectual trade-offs or resource trade-offs, where am I making them? What are our priorities? What's more important, A or B? What initiative is more important, B or C? Yada yada. So I find that pretty amazing, and I hope you all see the interestingness there and apply to it to the tools and the process you can bring into place. All right, so with that, I want to introduce and turn it over to Maddie Scott. Maddie is one of our leading product marketing managers here, been at Decision Lens a long time, and really knows her things and her Decision Lens, and we're glad to have Maddie on the event today. And Maddie's going to talk to a little bit about how you can add technological conversations to or technological solutions to this problem as well. When you're seeing that lack of priorities and you're seeing that ambiguous outcomes and benefits, and you add things like the model Joe put in place, how can you also add technology and software to make it work? So Maddie, if you can hear us, you are off and running.
I can. Thanks, Matt. I'm going to explain how the Decision Lens approach to strategic implementation complements Joe's important process changes. Before you can unleash your people or implement the value, we begin our engagements by leading with governance. As Matt mentioned earlier, there are several great solutions that make IT governance less daunting. However, we discovered many of these solutions are still incomplete. They do many things, such as budgeting and execution, really well, but lack the ability to bring your strategic vision to the forefront of the plan. This ultimately leads you down a less productive path, full of wasted meetings and time-consuming distractions. Since the goal of the webinar is to make strategic implementation a reality and not some urban legend, we are excited to share that the combination of the right strategic services that Joe described with dynamic prioritization software can turn your organization into an innovator. In order to deliver on a complete IT governance plan, strategy, prioritization and investments, and ongoing reviews are essential to your success. Decision Lens simplifies IT governance by filling in those gaps. You can truly see your strategic priorities in the investments you fund. Are you still stuck sending spreadsheets back and forth over email? Does your strategic initiative get started then quickly fall off the radar? A software-accelerated approach delivers a sophisticated and real-time plan for strategy implementation. Decision Lens mitigates the risk in strategic implementation and creates an environment that embraces change management. With advanced analytics and flexible visualizations, you can immediately see the impact and trade-offs between investment options. So, how do you begin to eliminate the nagging distractions in your strategic implementation? For starters, our customers ask the tough questions on day one. No topic is off limits, and any assumptions or negative thoughts are discussed then and there. Committing to change management is a full-time job, and everybody needs to be involved. We found that steady and efficient communication between leaders, participants, and stakeholders makes everything a lot easier. Ask yourself, am I committed to speaking positively about my initiatives? If the answer is no, there may be a better person for the task, or priorities need to be clarified. With increased complexity, it is critical to put your people in the best position for success. Joe spoke earlier about pairing capabilities with a strategic mindset. While your team may be understaffed or low on resources, there are still plenty of opportunities to deliver to your team's highest output. Implementing a strategic plan should be invigorating and deliberate. Ask yourself, what does success look like? Why are we creating a plan at all? What would we like to improve? From these answers will be different from organization to organization. We recommend identifying the initiatives that matter by prioritizing those that deliver against the strategy, not just those that look nice. Since you won't be able to accomplish every single initiative, setting priorities that are measurable and specific are paramount to success. From the survey you took while registering for the event, the top 2 obstacles to strategic implementation were unclear strategic intentions or desired outcomes, and priorities are undefined or ambiguous. If every team member has a separate list of priorities and goals, your strategic plan will not get very far. Uncover priorities from the start and get moving on the investments that matter most. I'm going to hop into Decision Lens and show you 3 visualizations that will make your strategic plan a reality in Decision Lens. So I'm just going to flip over. Got a great intro screen here. So in order to create a culture of objective decision making, we recommend involving your stakeholders from the start. In this example, our portfolio goal is to prioritize IT programs for funding. After a series of one-to-one comparisons made by the team, the overall weights were created. You can see how each person voted by criterion and see what the relative importance is. For example, we'll check out financial operational efficiency and competitive impact. Click in there and you can easily sort by participant or score, slice and dice your data however you want, and you can see the group voted that financial operational efficiency was moderately more important than competitive impact. Let's say you want to dive into, what makes up competitive impact. Double click to drill down and reveal the 3 criterion that lead to this criterion. You can also view in the detailed view a better breakdown of every single piece of priority weights that make it easier to tell a better story with your data. Engage your participants in the strategic discussion as edits are made to the priorities. Once you're satisfied with your criteria and rated your projects, we recommend heading on over to the sensitivity analysis. As you can see here, our priority weights are applied and our projects are here on the right. We can make easy on-the-fly edits. Right now, mobile payment is our top project, but let's say we want to increase align with business unit strategy. How do things change? What, loses value on our list here? You can achieve greater clarity on strategic intentions and adapt as circumstances changes. Priority shifts all the time, and this makes it certain that you're not left behind. This visual is a great conversation starter without the messiness of having to change everything and start from scratch. And finally, as your strategic plan progresses, you can start applying resources to your investments. In the what's in, what's out visualization, it's an easy place to create funding scenarios and see what projects make the mark and which ones will be left out. If you'd like to optimize on your people resources, things change, and you can also update your portfolio value immediately. Slice and dice your data in endless ways in Decision Lens. With strategic prioritization software, you can easily evaluate the amount of value delivered against the cost of the project for a truly benefits-based project analysis. It would be convenient if we could just create the strategic plan, assume it'll get done, but it never works that way. As Joe mentioned before, I'm sure many of you have experienced this firsthand. Strategic plans need constant attention and buy-in to be a success. Even more important than paying attention to your strategic plan is making sure the best ideas and investments are included from the start. Once that's in place, it will be a lot easier to reinforce your strategic plan and vision on a daily basis and fund the investments that most closely align with strategic priorities. Now I will kick it back to Matt for the question and answer portion of our day.
Thank you, Maddie. I think what it comes down to, and as I watch you talk through and think about what Joe said, it really comes down to making it possible to just know what the things are that align most to your strategy, and you need to have the things in place so that you avoid groups of people having to make decisions on their own, in a vacuum around a project, or whoever's yelling the loudest around a table. You need to put the things in place, and those things we talked today are the processes and the right plans to go with it, and then the right software to help you get through the data and have the visualizations. It's those things you need to actually make strategy, infused in the decisions you make and the things you do. So again, I appreciate it, Maddie. I think it was a really good view of what's there. All right, we got about a few minutes for questions. We got a few in, which I appreciate. Go ahead and send more in now to the chat if you've got more, and if not, don't forget you can email us at any time. And while I parse those questions, what's on your screen now is the way to get in touch with us moving forward. You've got Joe and Maddie's email addresses there on the screen on the left. You absolutely can communicate with them anytime you want or anytime you need. You've got a bunch of places to get started with Decision Lens or Business Change Leadership there with the sites, and then a great set of interactive demo videos of Decision Lens software in action there on the right. All right, so Joe, first question for you. So I'm going to may paraphrase it here, hope I get it right. In your model there were a number of obviously of different capabilities in the capability model. What's the most that you've seen, the most important or most impactful of those, if there are any comparisons between them?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm a big believer in the right-hand side first and foremost. Implementing. There's a belief or an experience that I have, and that's I'd rather be flawless at execution. I'd rather be great at execution of a flawed strategy than have a perfect strategy that is not executed very well. So I think implementing is critical, and I think I think what you guys offer is a way to provide clarity of priorities, so that people know what matters most when they're asked to do three different things at once. And so, in addition to kind of that implement leg, I think business governance and business planning, setting that 1 to 2 year portfolio of strategic projects prioritized, and then providing the governance or the air traffic control over top of it. I think so that you're generating course corrections, because plans are great, but then once the bullets start flying, so to speak, you constantly have to adjust the plans. And it's the ability to adjust the plans quickly in unison and in a coordinated way across a large organization that's going to generate competitive advantage for a company.
So this is me talking, actually, not a follow-up question, but it's interesting because you pointed out that got to be able to implement well to really be successful, and I think we heard that other places too. We work a lot with Gartner also, and one of the things that they've said consistently, and part of their project management and PPM groups is that, look, really good organizations have gotten really good at executing projects. They have gotten really efficient. Most have been successful more often than not. Most are within budget more often than not. Most are done on time more often than not. And so in their mind, like, we've baked out a lot of the efficiency of getting really good and need to focus on, are we now doing the right things? So my sort of corollary, my follow-up question to you is not just what's most important. Do you find that organizations you work with tend to be stronger at any of the capabilities than the others, and therefore need to focus on the ones, even though they may be less important, that they're just not as good at? Where do you seem to find the more existing strength across your model?
So I would say I think strategy. I think a lot of people have robust strategic planning processes, whether they insource or outsource that. There's a lot of competence, I think, in business around defining, a well-analyzed strategy. I think project management, program management are also typically very strong. Those disciplines have been around for a while. And what I also find is that there's complexity in business now that, quite honestly, project and program management skills are important and insufficient because of the complexity, and that's really that unleash the people, that center pillar, right? When you need leaders to think and behave differently, you're not going to project manage your way into that activity. You actually have to create different environments. So I find that while project and program management are most commonly strong, they're also insufficient. And then back on the strategy side, I do think people generally have very well-defined strategies, but they don't go to the level of prioritization and identifying, which of these is most important and which of these is going to generate the most value for the company. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why they don't do that. Some of it process, some of it system, some of it culture.
Got it. Very cool. Joe, another one for you, and again, I'll read it and make sure I understand it correct. When you focus on the people change management capability to support a transformation, what are some of the key approaches or models that you find particularly useful? So it sounds like he's asking about, really on that people change side, what's been the most successful approach or most successful sort of model for you?
So it's a great question. I'll try and do this in a simple way. There are a lot of methods out there around the people side of change. Certainly, if you're tool-oriented, and if you're looking for techniques to manage change, I think ProSci offers a really solid set of tools and processes at an execution level. However, I think that's a bit commoditized at this point. I think the real strategic lever for change, and I do hold change as a strategic process. The change process starts when an executive or someone inside an organization has an idea and wants to do something different. That's where you really got to start that process. And I've had some deep experience with the Change Leaders Roadmap, which is a methodology from a company called Being First out of Durango, Colorado. There's also another gentleman, Bob Miles, has an organization called Corporate Transformation, and he's got some fantastic methods and processes around leading change from a strategic perspective, generating high degrees of engagement with an incredible track record. And he's he's a former Harvard guy. He's kind of semi-retired now, but he's got some great methods and processes as well.
Very cool. just because I'm in shill mode as well. We did actually a webcast last summer with a change management expert. So for those of you either asked this question or are curious about it, check and see how decision lenses work with change management. There's a webcast out there you can find on our website there, the recording of it. It was a really good one with a long-time author and change management expert. All right, so I got time for about one more, and I want to end sort of with you here, Maddie, with one that I think is a good one. You showed, and I'm going to paraphrase them a little incorrectly here, but you showed some criteria there that was prioritized by the stakeholders there. And I saw that was sort of in there about outlining the strategy and different pieces. How flexible is the criteria in Decision Lens? Can I customize it to my existing strategy, or I got to start with something built into the tool?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. So we have kind of a library of great criteria from many of our customers that have been where you've been as a good starting point. Many of them include, I don't know, much more criteria than you'd ever use, but I think it gives you a great idea of, where to start from, because I think that's probably a real daunting process. We've got this blank slate. Where do we go from there? So it's completely customizable, and you can turn it into whatever works best for your organization.
Yeah, great. That's thanks. And just the person who asked that question, whether you start with one of those blueprints like Maddie talks about or not, you can really do anything you want with it. It is meant to be your strategy. You can start with a clean slate and import your exact strategy. You can start with a blueprint, change it to you. You can start with a blueprint and go with it, completely. So it really is meant to be customizable to you. All right, so we're getting close to the hour here, so I'm going to call it. If you didn't get your answer question, I apologize, and we'll probably get an email to you with some answers there. If you didn't get a chance to ask your question, no problem at all. Send Maddie or Joe or myself an email or respond to one of the invitations you got. And again, you'll get a note with this materials and this recording, so you can share it with other of your colleagues if you want to view any part of it again. And we really appreciate your time today and for joining us on an event, and look for another one in the coming months. Thanks again. Have a great day.